Arizona Wildlife Views, brought to you by the sale of hunting and fishing licenses and the Heritage Fund, lottery dollars working for wildlife. Some projects made possible by the Sportfish and Wildlife Restoration Fund.
Ready? All right, go find birds. Let's go.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Wildlife Views. I'm your host, Jim Harkin. We're here in beautiful Queen Creek Canyon, where depending on the season, the water of the creek flows through the desert washes. As you know, water is one of the most vital resources that Arizona has. On tonight's show, we focus on 3 unique waterways, beginning with Fossil Creek. Looking at the beautiful blue waters of Fossil Creek, and you don't need much imagination to see it as a wild and scenic river. And now it officially has that title. In 2009, President Barack Obama signed a law naming Fossil Creek one of the nation's wild and scenic rivers. A portion of the Verde River is the only other Arizona waterway to carry that designation. The Wild and Scenic River designation protects riverside land along both sides of the river corridor, blocks dams and other harmful water projects, and preserves a river's free-flowing nature. Considering the way Fossil Creek looks today, it's hard to imagine that only a few years ago, most of its flow was diverted to turn the turbines in 2 100-year-old power plants. The Childs and the Irving plants were modern marvels of their day when roads were in short supply and all the work was done by hand.
The project construction of that magnitude had to be pretty daunting because, as you can see, this whole area there were no roads. All there was a big long canyon with lots of water running through it. So all of the equipment that was brought in, the labor was brought in on horseback and mule trains and that sort of thing.
The 2 plants were still producing about 4 megawatts of power in 1999 when Arizona Public Service decided voluntarily to shut down operation on the creek and decommission the plants. Several years of planning and preparation were required before restoration of the river could begin. The Arizona Game and Fish Department worked hand in hand with many other agencies, including the Bureau of Reclamation, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and U.S. Forest Service on a native fish restoration project in advance of the return of full water flows. But restoring full flows to Fossil Creek meant more than just shutting down the plants and opening the spigot. The native fish restoration project took years to plan and included building a barrier about 2/3 the way down the river to keep non-native fish from swimming too far upstream. Once the barrier was in place, the native species had to be caught and removed from the stream, which was no simple task. To keep the stress on the fish at a minimum, they were long-lined or flown out by helicopter in 55-gallon drums, and then trucked a short distance to special holding tanks and into the care of the experts from the Arizona Game and Fish Department hatcheries. The native fish that were salvaged include speckled dace, round-tailed chub, sonora, and desert suckers. After Fossil Creek had been cleared of the non-native species that were a threat to the native fish, the process was reversed and the salvaged fish were returned to the creek as quickly as possible. In June of 2005, the diversion dam was officially closed and Fossil Creek began to roar back to life. It took another 3 years to completely remove the dam, and Fossil Creek is growing more like its old wild self every day, shaking off a century of servitude to the state's power grid. Prior to having 95% of its flow diverted to the power plants, Fossil Creek supported a distinctive aquatic ecosystem. The highly mineralized water resulted in travertine dams that created large pools and cascading waterfalls. Now that the full flow of 43 cubic feet per second has been restored, those dams, pools, and waterfalls are expected to rebuild naturally over time. With tourists already flocking to the creek to play in the cool water, APS began the less glamorous job of removing the remains of the power plants.
We shut down in June of 2005 with a proposed schedule of almost 5 years. It's going to take us, by the time we get everything cleaned out, and because a lot of the work, once we get everything out, has to be recontoured. We have to reseed with native vegetation. At Stair Lake, we've got to recontour the whole lake bed to make it look like it did initially. So it's going to take 5 years. It'll be the middle of 2010 before we're done. The reason for demolition of the flume is we have to put everything back to its natural state. The wood flume that we're taking out up above Irving is it's like railroad tie timbers, and it's all on trestle. It's a little more hazardous, and it has to be taken out because of that, because we have a lot of tourists come into this area and it's not safe to leave it there.
By the spring of 2009, the creek was really coming back to life, and so were the native fish populations.
We're down here sampling the fish in Fossil Creek. It's index sampling, just trying to get an idea of what's in here. Specifically, we're looking at chub, and so we've got an index of the relative abundance of chub that we're trying to get right now.
Scott and his crew placed 60 nets along different sections of the creek. Then they measured and checked each fish before releasing it back into the swift-moving water.
141.
We've got hoop nets that are baited, and they're placed in random locations, and we're making the assumptions that those hoop nets are capturing a fraction of the fish and that fraction remains stable. And so you end up with an index of abundance, not an actual abundance of fish.
The Arizona Game and Fish Department closed Fossil Creek to fishing in 2005 to give the natives a chance to come back, and they've recovered so well that in October 2009, the creek will become the country's first blue ribbon catch and release roundtail chub fishery.
There are a lot of very small fish in here, but there are some large chub. The tricky part's going to be trying to get your fly or barbless hook lure past the small fish to the big fish, because there are a lot of chub in here and they are incredibly naive. It's going to be very easy fishing for at least a while. But you're looking at the largest chub, maybe 12, 14 inches. There's a lot of chub in here between 6 and 9 inches.
Fossil Creek is fed by a spring with a constant year-round flow, and it cuts through 2 national forests as it meanders 17 miles from its headwaters, just below the Mogollon Rim, to where it empties into the Pedro River. The journey to return this river to its natural state has been a long but satisfying one for all the partners involved.
This is just sort of the completion of a project that was started many, many years ago, and it's very exciting to sort of have closure with this particular stream. A lot of people have worked very hard to try to get to this point.
I can't wait until that roundtail chub fishery is open and I get to try my hand at catching some of those lively little fish. You know, protecting our native rivers and streams like Fossil Creek is of vital importance, and to that end, the Arizona Game and Fish Commission recently acquired 4 miles of the threatened San Pedro River. The San Pedro is a rarity among rivers. For one thing, it flows north from Mexico into the United States, one of only 2 rivers to do so. And it is also one of the last undammed rivers in the Southwest. Now another 4 miles of this jewel are being protected as part of the state's settlement with the Asarco Mining Company.
The settlements we're announcing today are 2 in nature. The first one is for damages caused to state lands by ASARCO and the Ray Hayden mine over the years. That's the natural resource damages claim. And the second is a custodial trust settlement.
The Natural Resources Damage Settlement provides for the transfer to the Arizona Game and Fish Commission of 3 parcels of land totaling about 1,000 acres along the lower San Pedro River. The transfer also includes monies for the restoration and maintenance of the land in order to safeguard water resources and protect wildlife.
This particular acquisition gives us an opportunity to take extensive conservation actions to benefit 5 different federally listed species that are listed under the Endangered Species Act, and also 8 species that we've identified as species of critical concern within the state of Arizona.
The 3 parcels that border the river are located south of the mining towns of Winkleman and Hayden, near the confluence of Aravaipa Creek.
The San Pedro River is a lush river corridor that forms an oasis in the midst of 2 of North America's largest deserts. Riparian habitats are the most critical habitats for riparian obligate species, which include many of our more rare and in many cases threatened avian species. And it's critically important to the aquatic habitats, which contain some of our most rare and threatened fish species. Probably the biggest beneficiary in this acquisition will be the southwest willow flycatcher. The habitats along the San Pedro River are outstanding flycatcher habitats. The parcels being acquired have outstanding opportunity for restoration of those habitats that willow flycatchers are dependent upon, and we're particularly excited about the opportunity to be able to do those types of restorations.
The settlements represent many years of work and cooperation among several state agencies, ASARCO, and other cooperating states after the mining giant filed for bankruptcy in 2005. Besides the Natural Resources Settlement, Arizona will also receive $23 million to clean up 3 historic mining sites in the southern part of the state. Now with this latest land acquisition, approximately 54 miles of the San Pedro are under some form of protection. For the threatened and endangered species that rely on this riparian corridor for survival, this is nothing but good news.
All rolled together, this is probably one of the most significant opportunities for recovery of T&E species, conservation of migratory waterfowl, and the ability to take care of T&E fish species all in one acquisition process. We're excited about the prospect. We're going to roll up our sleeves and we're ready to go to work.
The areas along rivers are some of the best places to view wildlife. So tonight, the Arizona Wildlife Viewing Guide takes us on a leisurely cruise down the lower Colorado River, where wildlife, hidden coves, and plenty of history are just waiting to be discovered. Today, the Wildlife Viewing Guide points us south and west along our border with California and onto the very lifeblood of Arizona itself, the Colorado River. This portion of the river is known as the Lower Colorado, and we are checking out the 95 miles of it that flow between the Imperial Dam to the south and the Palo Verde Dam to the north.
The river down here it's kind of a serpentine river. It's not channelized for the most part, so it's in its natural state. And a lot of the attributes to that are that we do have a lot of National Wildlife Refuge lands that inhabit this stretch of the river. We have the Imperial National Wildlife Refuge, which basically starts at Martinez Lake, and that ends at Cibola National Wildlife Refuge. And that refuge continues on the river all the way up to essentially Cibola and Blythe area. So that's one of the reasons why we have such a pristine river down here, is we don't have human encroachment, and we do have it protected for the most part.
As Richard mentioned, part of that protection comes from the Imperial Wildlife Refuge. The refuge was established on Valentine's Day in 1941 and protects wildlife habitat along 30 miles of the lower Colorado River in Arizona and California, including the last non-channelized section before the river enters Mexico. More than half of the refuge's 25,000 acres is federally designated wilderness. Wilderness is protected to ensure that nature, not people, is the primary influence on this quiet, scenic place. If you visit the Wildlife Refuge, be sure to hike the beautiful Painted Desert Trail. 20 to 30 million years ago, volcanic eruptions dominated this region and created the multicolored mounds that you see today. The loop trail is just over a mile and leads you through some of the wonders of the lower Sonoran Desert. Now, back to our trek up the river, beginning with our launch point at Martinez Lake.
Yeah, Martinez Lake is one of the few areas where there actually is development. Most of this lower river is pretty pristine for the most part, but Martinez Lake, there is a lot of private building going on, a lot of luxury homes. But it seems like for the most part, between the homes being built and the natural environment, it seems to mesh pretty well, and it doesn't get out of whack down here. So they both coexist pretty well down here. We have a lot of side channels along the main stem of the Colorado River, and through time they've become overgrown by a lot of the non-native species of habitat here, and we've had to open those up due to these being closed off to a lot of the backwaters and lakes that connect those. And so, in cooperation with the Bureau of Reclamation, a lot of other government agencies, they have done some widening projects on some of those side channels, thus improving water quality, water flow, oxygen, and creating better habitats for some of our endangered fish species such as the razorback sucker.
While some of the side channels have been opened up, others are a little harder to find and may remind you of something out of the African Queen more than an Arizona river. But what you can find behind all this overgrowth reveals some jewels from Arizona's past, like an old miner shack called the Watchman's Cabin.
The lower Colorado River down here has a lot of history to it. And in our tour today, we passed a lot of the old mining operations that used to occur down here in the lower Colorado River. There's remnants of the old cable crossing where they used to cross cable crossing cars. And then right behind us where we're filming today is one of the old miners' cabins where they used to hang out and used to stay during the hot summer months. And then also some of the other things around here that reflect the history are there used to be Indians down here along the Colorado River and that used to thrive. And there are remnants of rock petroglyphs along this lower Colorado River, which shows evidence of the past through the Indian tribes that used to inhabit this lower river.
The fact that these places remain basically undisturbed speaks to the remoteness of this area.
A lot of this stuff, it's still here and preserved because it is off the beaten path, so that makes it nice. Not everybody knows about it, and so, like again, it just ties into the natural state that this lower river is in, and you know, we like to preserve that and just keep it that way. So.
As you can imagine, a large water source like the Colorado River cutting through this arid desert is a beacon for wildlife.
It's just amazing to see this oasis and see wildlife thrive out here, because when you drive out here you do go through a lot of the lower Sonoran habitat typified by the creosote flats, desert pavement, and then you come up onto this luxury of a river that has been untouched for the most part, and the wildlife and the habitat really do thrive along this lower Colorado River. We have anywhere from our small game species, non-game, to some endangered species. Some of our endangered species that are unique down here include the southwest willow flycatcher, and also some of our marsh bird species, for example, the Yuma clapperel, which is also an endangered marsh bird species. And then in the water itself, we do have the endangered razorback sucker, which is a native fish that used to thrive here, but through the damming of rivers and elevated temperatures and those procedures, it has become pretty much extinct, but that is a species that we are reintroducing down here and is starting to thrive. As far as other species down here, we do have several big game species, for example, the desert bighorn sheep. This unit here is part of Game Management Unit 43B, and it's one of our most productive and most abundant wildlife, sheep wildlife units in the state, and they do very well down here. And further with that, we have mule deer, desert mule deer that inhabit this lower stretch of the river on the sides of the river, as well as wild horses and burros. They thrive and do very well down here. Other species that we do have down here are some of our waterfowl species. They do migrate down here, and we have anything from the common American coot to widgeon and Canada geese. Of course, our fish species are kind of world-renowned down here, especially the flathead catfish and largemouth bass. Flathead catfish, they can get up to 80+ pounds. So this area is known for, for its quality flathead catfish, and people come from all over the state and the nation to fish down here for them.
Just as wildlife are drawn to the river, so are people who want to enjoy all the different kinds of recreation it has to offer.
Depending on the time of year is the type of recreation that occurs down here. In the springtime right now is when the bass fishing gets really, really good because the bass are spawning, they're on beds. And so right now, a lot of our recreational boaters are the angling public. We have a lot of tournaments on the weekends down here, both state, local, and federal fishing tournaments. So you'll see a lot of that during the week and on the weekends, fishing for largemouth bass. And then just the general local angler comes out here on the weekends to recreate fishing and just boating in general down here. During the summer months, though, it becomes a little different clientele. We have a lot of the Southern California folks who come out here and down here with their jet skis, wakeboarding, and things like that. And when the water level drops down here on the lower river, we do have a lot of sandbars that are exposed. And so that's where a lot of the boats tie up and they recreate on the sandbars. The wintertime is usually the calm season. It's when you can see the most wildlife because, a lot of the waterfowl species, bird species have migrated down here, so it's a really nice time of the year. The weather's not too hot. But then again, during the summer, it is a great place to come. During the week, you don't have to fight those weekend crowds. During the week, it's not as busy, so you can see bighorn sheep coming out of the water, things like that.
Along with enjoying the river for recreation, millions of people in Arizona and California depend on the lower Colorado River to support their municipal, agricultural, and industrial water and power needs. Fortunately, many state, federal, and tribal stakeholders are working together to ensure the future of the river.
Like I said, I've been all up and down the state along the Colorado River, and this is really a unique area as far as human encroachment, and to keep it in its natural state, really is important to me. I think that the wildlife species we have are unique down here, and I think it's just important to keep it in its natural state, and that's what I feel is important to me is just the natural beauty of the lower Colorado River.
The Colorado River flows more than 1,400 miles from its origins in the Rocky Mountains into the Gulf of California. More than 500 miles of that journey is in the state of Arizona. In our continuing series on sporting dogs, tonight we meet one of America's favorites, the Golden Retriever.
This is Golden Retriever Tasha, and she is almost 3. And she's here today competing in conformation. Golden Retrievers are a sporting breed. They can be a great dog with the right home. A family needs to either go to a responsible breeder or perhaps consider rescue. They're a high energy dog. They shed terribly. They're very smart and they're versatile, but they need training just like any other dog. and they love the water. And they are very oral. They're an oral breed, so they can do a lot of chewing when they're a puppy. They can be good with children if they're given the correct training. You can show them in agility and conformation, which is the beauty pageant stuff. You can also do hunting, field work, obedience. They are used for guide dogs, therapy dogs, drug detection dogs. Lap dogs. I've had Goldens for about 22 years, and they're a great breed. Oh, they're suitable for I think any sort of family, really, from the family with small children to elderly folks. They need a lot of exercise. Especially when they're younger, they need a lot of exercise. They do have some health problems in this breed. They can have hip dysplasia, eye problems, elbow problems, heart problems, and unfortunately cancer is becoming more and more of a problem in this breed.
And that's our show for this evening. If you have any questions about anything you saw on the show, check out our website at azgfd.gov. On behalf of producers Gary Schaefer and Carol Lind, I'm your host Jim Harkin. Thanks for watching.